And let's welcome to the show, Kieran McAnulty. Kieran, good afternoon, our time, and hello to you, sir.
Yeah, g'day. How you getting on?
Yeah, no, getting there. There's a bit of snow supposedly forecast for the old South Island. We haven't seen it in Dunedin. I think it's up in the hills though. So fire's already going, and staying warm and having a good time. Having a good
I
time.
remember in my time in Dunedin when it snowed, it was a pretty special occasion. So, but I also know it sort of grounds the city to a halt in some areas, isn't it?
Well, it does. It's snow in Dunedin's fun because it's around for long enough to be kind of like, oh, isn't it magical, but not too long to become a pain in the ass.
Yeah,
So
I do.
it's kind of nice. But what does happen is because you'll get snow in the hills around Dunedin, and sometimes not down on the flats. But you might work in the flats and have to come from the hills. So because people can't get to work, they just go everything's shut, which is a good
Yeah,
idea. They used to kind of do schools if you needed to, here and there and here and there. But of course, the school pupils come from all over Dunedin, so you might be in the hills and not be able to get down to your flats to get to your school. So they just cancel everything now, and we just call them. Everyone has a snow day. It's like a little holiday, a snow day. It's nice.
cool.
What's not so cool, from the looks of things, is these what's happening with Māori Wards at the minute. I highlighted something from a TVNZ story. It basically says the future of Mastertons, but also other Māori wards, is up for discussion. The Māori Wards bill has had its second reading, been presented for its third reading in Parliament, and has been slammed as utterly shameful by your good self there. Tell us about Māori Wards and why this is utterly shameful.
Well, a few years ago, the situation was that a local council could decide which is the best way to establish wards for their district, and
Right.
they consulted, a decision was made, and they just got on with it. But for some unknown reason, if they wanted to establish a Māori ward, they had to go through a longer process, which required more work, and they had to go to a referendum. And when we were in government, we said, well, that's not fair. It should be the same process for all wards. Why is it different for Māori? So we
Sure.
changed it and brought them all into the same playing field. And now this government wants to go back to the old ways.
So because all we hear about in the news is Māori wards, but there's other kinds of wards as well. We sometimes, if we're getting an honest conversation, hear people talking about rural wards, and I'm assuming that's set up for the rural sector, and that might fight on the behalf of farmers and the farming community. But those wards never seem to be in the news for discussion. Māori wards seem to be. And are there any other wards other than rural and Māori wards?
Well, there's urban wards, and so towns or cities might be split into different areas. There's also at-large wards, which just cover the whole district. Now, all of those can just be set up by the council, and then they carry on with it. But what's interesting is, could you just imagine if a Labor government proposed that in order to establish a rural ward, there had to be a referendum. And could you imagine what the National Party would say about that? There'd be an
Yeah.
uproar. And rightly so, because it would be outrageous. The simple fact of the matter is there are fewer people living in the rural areas. And to ensure that they get a voice at the table, they establish a rural ward. And if
Yeah.
there was a referendum, there's a very good chance that the people in town would outvote the people in the country and they wouldn't get one. That's why we don't require a referendum. But this government wants to bring one in for Māori. Exactly the same scenario will play out, is that there have been numerous councils once the rule was changed and the playing field was levelled, they brought in Māori wards. There was only a very small number, only two, I think, before the rule was changed that were established. And it just goes to show that when it is level, councils are able to operate as they should be.
So we don't want townies making decisions on rural wards and if they should or shouldn't exist, but we're fine with non-Māori making decisions on if Māori wards should or shouldn't exist.
Well, the government are, the rest of us aren't.
Yeah.
I think it's an absolute disgrace. I mean, it's quite clear what their motivations are, and the minister can stand there and talk about democracy all he likes. I don't think anyone really believes him. You couldn't find a more disingenuous minister than Simeon Brown, in my view. He has acted against the interests of local government ever since becoming the minister, and this is a perfect example of that. The majority of councils have indicated that they oppose what the government's doing. There's more councils that oppose this than support the repeal of water reforms. And I asked the minister in the House during the committee stage on 4 occasions what councils asked for this, and he refused to answer. Now, if he had at least one council that got in touch with him and asked for it, he would be able to give me an answer. The reason he shut up is because he knew he'd been caught out. It's quite clear they are being motivated by race. They're doing this to placate their coalition partners who we know campaigned on the basis of race, and it's a shameful day for Parliament.
Yeah, it's the exact point we made, that they're not putting up a fight for rural wards, urban wards, at-large wards. It's only for Māori wards. And it's what we've been saying, especially about David Seymour and ACT, but let's not just give him the target on this one, is when they only debate we need to make things equal based on race. None of the other areas do they want to make things equal. And when I say equal, that's got air quotes around it, by the way. Then you know that they are the ones that are race baiting and are making things about race because they don't want to make anything else, quote unquote, equal. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's the fact that things aren't now going to be equal that is so outrageous here. Is that if they really believed in things being equal, then the process for establishing a Māori ward would be exactly the same for processing any other ward. But it's not. And so you either believe in fairness or you don't. Now, if their principles were that they don't believe there should be race-based electorates or wards, then let's have that discussion. Again, we would oppose that, but they're not doing that, are they? Because they're not touching the Māori electorates. This actually isn't a discussion as to whether there should be Māori wards or not. It's about the process to establish them. The facts are there for all to see. When it's not a level playing field, they don't happen. When it is, they do. That's what they don't like, and that's what they want to change.
So if we were going to have that discussion about should there or shouldn't there be Māori wards, what's your rationale behind why they're needed?
Well, of course, Māori electorates have been a long time in the mix, very historic element to our democracy. They were established to limit the level of Māori voice in Parliament. And now they, with population changes over many generations, they were there to ensure that Māori representatives are there. You could make the argument at an academic level that with proportional representation, there's no longer a need for Māori seats. But successive, and I don't agree with that, just to be really clear, but successive governments have recognised that they play an important role. If they play an important role in Parliament, then surely to Christ they play an important role in local government. And you'd have to think, though, that if the numbers were different and it was a different situation, let's say hypothetically it was actually a Labor government that was bringing in this proposed change, what do you think the National Party's position would be? It would be in opposition to their very bill that they themselves are putting forward now. Their principles are utterly flexible, and they pick and choose when they apply them.
There's one other part about, well, there's probably numerous other parts about this, but there's one other part that I've been thinking about today. This government got themselves elected on being anti-mandate and being, not wanting things centralised, allowing the areas to keep control of their waters or hospitals or universities, whatever it is. And now they're mandating how this has to go for a local body. It feels like, I know they're not centralising it from Wellington, but it feels like that they're mandating and centralising the power-making structure to now tell the regions what to do. Is there hypocrisy there?
Oh, 100%. And that's exactly what they're doing. They campaigned on getting Wellington out of local decision-making.
Yep.
And then Wellington is imposing something onto councils that they don't want. Councils themselves have called it an overreach. They're forcing councils to have to pay for the referendums. And after they reverse the water reforms and dismiss the recommendations from the future local government review, councils are cash-strapped. So this is a bill that they could do without. Yeah. And there's a really important point here, is that this was never compulsory. A local council was never required to set up a Māori ward. It was only if they and their community wanted to. So there are some councils that for whatever reason have chosen it's not right for them. And that's totally fine with me because it's their community, it's their choice. Some of them are happy with the iwi reps and the iwi prefer it to be that way, and so be it. But for them to make this out to be that this is something that's been imposed on councils by the previous government and they are reversing it back to what it was, that is not true, it is dishonest, and it ignores the facts that's there for all to see, that councils have made this choice for themselves after listening to their communities, and those choices should be respected.
Kieran McAnulty, thank you for your time.
No worries. Cheers, Pat.